Asylum is a form of protection by the United States government extended to individuals who have well-founded fear of persecution in their home countries. What does well-founded fear of persecution mean? There is no universal definition of persecution. There are still debates as to what persecution is. There are debates in the United States courts, in the immigration court, in the federal courts. There are case laws related to this. What actions, what does amount to persecution? Persecution is, it should be noted that is different from prosecution. It's not the same thing as prosecution. Prosecution is punishing someone as a way for society to punish someone or deter others from committing criminal acts, versus persecution is when an innocent person who is entitled to do what they have done are being persecuted by the government or government actors or other groups or individuals who the government of the applicant is either unwilling or unable to control. That's what persecution is. Now, why does the United States extend this protection to individuals? Why does the United States grant asylum? Is it because the United States is a humanitarian and greatest country? Partially, yes, but mostly it's because the United States is a party to 1951 Convention regarding status of refugees, United Nations Convention. Now, as part of asylum case, you have to demonstrate that you have a well-founded fear. Now, what does well-founded fear mean? Well-founded means that it is both objectively and subjectively is reasonable, that it's not because you are too sensitive to things that had happened to you in your home country. Well-founded fear can be demonstrated two ways. One is you can demonstrate that you have experienced past persecution, and that would create a presumption, rebuttable presumption, that you would experience persecution in the future. Or if you haven't experienced past persecution, then you can demonstrate to the satisfaction of the asylum officer or to the immigration judge that you will experience, that there is a reasonable possibility that you will experience persecution if you had to return to your home country. This reasonable possibility, the catchword reasonable, is very important because the burden, the extent by which you have to demonstrate that there is, that you would be persecuted in your home country is reasonable. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to prove it beyond reasonable doubt. You don't have to prove it to the extent that it will definitely will take place, or even you don't have to prove that it will probably take place. All you have to do is demonstrate that it's reasonably possible that if you do return to your home country, that you will be persecuted either by the government, government actors, agencies, agents of the government, or groups or individuals who the government is unwilling or unable to control. Now, there is a wrong perception that persecution or asylum has to be always political. There is actually a catchword, political asylum, that everybody uses, and it creates this perception that one has to be politically active or involved to be eligible for asylum, and that's not the case. To be eligible for asylum, the persecution has to be on account of one of the 5 bases, and those bases are race, nationality, membership in particular social group, political opinion, or religion. And all of those 5 bases are inclusive. That means, for example, when you say race, it doesn't necessarily mean white and black or brown. It could also include the ethnicity, ethnic origin, membership in a tribal group. Political opinion itself doesn't necessarily require to be politically involved, to be member of a political party or participation in demonstrations or protests against the government or being a member of oppositional group. No, political opinion can be expressed many different ways. Just a simple disagreement with the government or government agents or with the orders of the police or the government of your home country can be considered political opinion. There are many different ways that political opinion can be expressed, even though the individual himself or herself may not believe that he or she is expressing political opinion. It may be perceived this way by the country, by the government of the country, or as I said, groups or individuals. And the reason why I always mention groups or individuals that are the government of your home country is unwilling or unable to control is because it's also important to understand that the actors in the case, in the context of asylum or persecution, those who do commit persecution against the individual applying for asylum do not necessarily have to be government agents or part of the government. It can be any groups of individuals who the government is unable or unwilling to control. So, for example, in the context of Latin America, you may take examples of gangs. The government may not support those gangs, but it's certainly in some of the Latin American countries, it cannot control those gangs and drug cartels, or you take nationalistic groups. You take in Russia, ethnic the nationalistic groups against ethnic minorities. You take skinheads. Those are not necessarily, although in some cases they do have ties and somewhat support of the government, but they're not necessarily the government actors. But nevertheless, they would be still considered for the purposes of proving persecution for asylum case. It would be considered persecution because the government may not be able to control or is unwilling to control. So if you have a well-founded fear of persecution in your home country based on those 5 inclusive bases, on account of those 5 inclusive bases, then you might be eligible for asylum.